Hey there. Tonight we're heading back to explore something a bit different. The everyday jobs that kept ancient civilizations running. Not the pharaohs or emperors you've heard about, but the people doing the strange, necessary, and often bizarre work that made societies function. From professional mourners to oracle interpreters, these were the folks with titles that would make your LinkedIn profile look pretty ordinary. If this kind of slow, meandering history helps you unwind, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it genuinely brings you some peace. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. There's something oddly comforting about knowing we're all drifting off to the same quiet stories. So dim the lights, maybe turn on that fan for some soft background noise, and let's wander through the more unusual corners of the ancient job market. Picture this. You're scrolling through job listings in ancient Rome and you come across professional mourner must be able to wail convincingly for 6 to 8 hours. Previous experience with dramatic sobbing preferred. Yes, that was a real occupation. In many ancient cultures, grief was considered too important to leave to amateurs. Professional mourners, called praefici in Rome, were hired to ensure funerals had the proper emotional weight. They weren't just crying randomly. This was skilled labor. They learned the deceased's life story, memorized their accomplishments, and delivered personalized lamentations that would make even distant relatives tear up. Some specialized in different types of grief. The soft weeping for gentle souls, the dramatic wailing for warriors, the dignified sniffling for nobles. In ancient Egypt, mourners covered themselves in dust and mud, beat their chests, and threw dirt on their heads while reciting prayers for the dead. It was theater, yes, but sacred theater. Death was serious business, and someone needed to make sure it sounded that way. The pay wasn't bad either. A good mourner could make more in a day than many craftsmen made in a week. Of course, the work was emotionally draining even when you were faking it. Spending your days surrounded by death and grief, even professionally, took its toll. Then there were the oracle interpreters, perhaps the most pressure-filled job in the ancient world. Imagine being responsible for translating the mumbled, often incoherent pronouncements of a priestess high on volcanic gases into actionable advice for kings and generals. At the Oracle of Delphi, the Pythia would sit over a crack in the earth, breathing in ethylene gas that put her into a trance-like state. She'd babble seemingly random words and phrases, and it was the interpreter's job to turn this into coherent prophecy. No pressure at all, except that getting it wrong could lead to military disasters, failed harvests, or very angry rulers. These interpreters became masters of diplomatic language. They crafted prophecies that were vague enough to be interpreted multiple ways, but specific enough to seem meaningful. You will destroy a great empire could mean you'd conquer your enemies or accidentally destroy your own kingdom. It was the ancient art of covering your bases. The most successful interpreters understood psychology as much as religion. They knew what people wanted to hear and how to frame advice in terms of divine will. They were part therapist, part political advisor, part fortune teller, all while pretending to simply translate the words of the gods. In ancient Rome, there was an entire profession dedicated to watching birds and interpreting their behavior to predict the future. These augurs didn't just glance up at the sky occasionally. They were trained specialists who could read meaning into every wing flutter and flight pattern. The job required years of study. Different birds meant different things. Eagles were associated with Jupiter and indicated matters of state. Ravens could predict death or transformation. The direction birds flew, how they ate, whether they sang or stayed silent. All of this was data to be analyzed and interpreted. Augurs had to memorize complex charts and procedures. They used special curved staffs called lituus to mark out sections of sky for observation. They knew the proper rituals for bird watching, the right prayers to say, and how to read the omens in context of current events. The strangest part, this wasn't considered superstition. It was science. Roman generals wouldn't march to war without consulting the augurs. Important decisions of state waited on the behavior of birds. These specialists held real political power, which meant their interpretations could influence the course of history. Of course, some augurs probably learned to see what their employers wanted to see. If a general was determined to attack, the birds would conveniently indicate favorable omens. It was a delicate balance between genuine belief and practical politics. In ancient Egypt, there were professional dreamers, people whose job was to have dreams on behalf of others and interpret their meaning. Temples employed these specialists who would sleep in sacred spaces, hoping to receive divine visions that could guide important decisions. The process was surprisingly formal. Clients would present their questions to the temple, often along with offerings. The professional dreamer would perform purification rituals, sleep in a designated area, and attempt to dream answers to the queries. Upon waking, they'd interpret the symbolism and deliver their findings. These weren't just random people claiming to have meaningful dreams. They studied dream symbolism extensively, learning the significance of different animals, colors, actions, and scenarios that appeared in visions. They kept detailed records of dreams and their outcomes, building databases of symbolic meaning. Some dreamers specialized in specific types of questions, matters of health, business decisions, relationship advice, or military strategy. The most skilled could apparently dream on command about particular subjects, though how exactly they managed this remains a mystery. The job came with significant responsibility. People made major life decisions based on these interpreted dreams. Merchants decided whether to pursue trade routes. Families chose marriage partners, and even pharaohs consulted dream specialists before important campaigns. Ancient China had a job that sounds almost too strange to believe. Professional hermits. These were people employed by the imperial court to live in isolation and contemplate philosophical questions, emerging only when their insights were needed. The position required genuine wisdom and the ability to endure extended solitude. Court hermits would retreat to mountain caves or forest huts for months or years at a time, studying classical texts, meditating, and developing their understanding of natural and human nature. When summoned, they were expected to provide advice on matters of governance, ethics, and policy. Their isolation was seen as purifying. Removed from the corruption and distractions of court life, they could achieve clarity of thought impossible for those caught up in daily politics. The job attracted genuine philosophers, but also clever individuals who understood that mystique was part of the appeal. The longer you stayed away, the more valuable your eventual words became. Some hermits became legendary figures, their rare appearances at court treated as major events. The pay was irregular but could be substantial. A hermit whose advice proved particularly valuable might receive land grants, gold, or lifetime support. Of course, if your philosophical insights led to disaster, retirement might become permanent rather than temporary. In ancient Greece, there were professional applauders called claqueurs who were hired to attend theatrical performances and ensure proper audience response. This wasn't just about clapping. It was about understanding the rhythm and emotional flow of drama. Different types of applause were required for different moments. Comedies needed laughter at precisely the right beats. Tragedies required respectful silence, gasps of horror, and cathartic sobbing at the climax. These professionals studied the plays in advance and knew exactly when and how to respond. The best claqueurs were artists in their own right. They could gauge the mood of a real audience and amplify it appropriately. They knew how to start a standing ovation, when to call for an encore, and how to rescue a performance that was falling flat. The job required genuine appreciation for theater plus the acting skills to make artificial responses seem natural. Bad claqueurs were obvious and could actually harm a performance. Good ones were invisible, seamlessly blending their professional responses with genuine audience reactions. Playwrights and actors valued skilled claqueurs highly. In a competitive theatrical environment, proper audience response could make the difference between success and failure. Some claqueurs became so respected that their presence at a performance was seen as an endorsement of quality. The ancient world also had professional food tasters, but their job was far more complex than simply checking for poison. Royal tasters were trained to detect subtle flavors, identify ingredients, and even determine the emotional state of the cook based on how the food was prepared. These specialists developed incredibly refined palates through years of training. They could identify dozens of different spices, detect when meat was from a stressed animal, and notice if bread had been made with water from a different source than usual. The poison detection aspect was real and dangerous. Tasters learned to recognize the taste and effects of various toxins. They understood which foods were most likely to be tampered with and how different poisons might be disguised. Some carried antidotes, though their effectiveness was questionable. But tasters also served as quality control for royal kitchens. They ensured that only the finest ingredients reached the ruler's table and that preparation met exacting standards. They might reject food for being too salty, not fresh enough, or improperly seasoned. The position required courage, obviously, but also diplomacy. Tasters had to give honest feedback about food quality without insulting the kitchen staff. They needed to distinguish between genuine threats and simple mistakes while maintaining the smooth operation of royal meals. In ancient Mesopotamia, there were professional letter writers who specialized in crafting correspondence for the illiterate majority. But this wasn't just transcription. It was a complex form of communication consulting. These scribes understood the subtle art of written diplomacy. They knew how to phrase requests to maximize the chance of positive responses, how to deliver bad news without causing offense, and how to write love letters that would actually be effective. Different types of correspondence required different skills. Business letters needed precise legal language. Family communications required appropriate emotional tone. Diplomatic messages demanded careful attention to protocol and hierarchy. The best letter writers became known for their specialties. Some were masters of persuasive business correspondence. Others crafted beautiful romantic letters that could win hearts from a distance. A few specialized in legal documents or religious communications. Clients would explain their situation and desired outcome, and the letter writer would craft appropriate text. They might suggest changes to the client's approach, recommend timing for sending messages, or advise on follow-up communications. Ancient Rome had professional line standers called locari who would hold places in queues for wealthy citizens. This wasn't just about convenience. In a society where many services were first come, first served, having a good line stander could be essential for accessing everything from legal hearings to popular entertainments. The job required stamina, reliability, and social skills. Line standers needed to hold their positions for hours or sometimes days, while also being pleasant enough that other people in line wouldn't cause trouble. Some locari developed specialties. Those who worked legal queues learned enough about court procedures to provide useful information to their employers. Others who waited for entertainment tickets became experts on seating arrangements and show quality. The work was irregular but could be lucrative during busy periods. Major legal cases, popular gladiatorial games, or important government announcements could create high demand for professional line-standing services. There was also an element of strategy involved. Experienced line standers knew which queues moved fastest, which officials were most likely to show up on time, and how to position themselves for maximum efficiency. Perhaps strangest of all were the ancient world's professional sleepers. In some cultures, these individuals were employed to sleep in sacred spaces or at important locations, either to receive divine dreams or simply to ensure that someone was always present. Temple sleepers in various cultures would spend nights in holy places, hoping to receive visions or messages from gods. Their dreams were recorded and interpreted as potential divine communications. Some professional sleepers worked for wealthy families, sleeping in houses to provide security or to maintain a human presence in important locations. Others were employed during religious festivals to ensure that sacred fires or offerings were never left unattended. The job required the unusual skill of being able to sleep reliably in different environments while remaining alert enough to wake if needed. Professional sleepers had to be light enough sleepers to detect problems, but heavy enough sleepers to actually rest in potentially uncomfortable or strange locations. These odd occupations remind us that every civilization creates the jobs it needs, no matter how strange they might seem to outsiders. Professional mourners ensured proper respect for the dead. Oracle interpreters provided a bridge between divine will and human decision-making. Bird watchers offered a systematic approach to understanding natural omens. What's fascinating is how seriously these roles were taken. They weren't considered jokes or scams. They were essential services that people relied on for important decisions. The professionals who filled these positions often required years of training and genuine expertise in their unusual specialties. Many of these jobs serve psychological and social functions that we've replaced with different professions today. Therapists, life coaches, market researchers, and entertainment consultants all fill roles that might once have been handled by oracle interpreters, professional dreamers, or ceremonial specialists. The ancient world was full of people doing necessary work that happened to sound bizarre to modern ears. They were the unsung heroes of daily life, making sure that grief was properly expressed, omens were correctly interpreted, and important people got good seats at the theater. So the next time you think your job description is a little odd, remember the professional bird watchers of Rome, the temple sleepers of Egypt, and the ceremonial applauders of Athens. They all found ways to make a living by providing services their societies genuinely needed, even if those needs seem strange to us now. And perhaps that's the most comforting thought of all, that every era finds ways to create meaningful work, even in the most unexpected corners of human experience.